In the last video, I discussed 10 places across America that I believe would be deserving of national park status. But that was highly subjective and subject to my interest, which I understand is not very likely to happen. So this time, I want to dive in deep to what I believe will be America's 64th and newest national park. What I've done is I've picked out 7 of the most likely candidates and will be giving my opinion as to whether or not they deserve national park status. Now, the process of designating a national park is very complicated and takes years. First, there needs to be a group of lawmakers who back the idea, who then enact a law that requires the National Park Service to oversee the feasibility of a national park. Since there have been so many areas which have been nominated over the years, the Park Service prioritizes certain parks on a point system, and submits only the highest ranking areas to the House and Senate in the form of a bill. This process can be more likely to take place if the area is already under the National Park Service. Remember, they administer far more than just our 63 national parks. It's why the past 13 parks dating back to 1992 were simply redesignations, and I'd imagine that it'll continue to be that way. Though it's still not impossible we could see entirely new national parks as well. The first 2 locations we'll be talking about would be just that. At the number 7 spot is Tongas National Forest in Alaska. I almost included this place in my last video because not only is it one of the more likely candidates, but it's also highly deserving of national park status. Covering 17 million acres, the Tongas is our nation's largest national forest, home to some of the last remaining old-growth temperate rainforest in the world. Logging over the last century has really changed the area, as they target strands of forest with the largest old-growth trees. This has gotten so out of hand that the Biden administration had to step in and reinstate a roadless rule that bans logging and road building on 9 million acres of the forest. If this still isn't enough, however, I could see them taking drastic measures, like creating Tongas National Park. Overall, this story reminds me of Redwood National Park in California and how it became a national park. It's why the level of protection offered by the status is so important, and due to what's happening at the Tongas, I see no reason why it shouldn't be set aside as a national park. Number 6, Sha National Forest in Illinois. In December 2022, the city of Carbondale, which sits right outside this forest, passed a resolution supporting the creation of Sha National Park and Climate Preserve. It's rare that a non-National Park Service site gains this much momentum in its journey to become a national park, but it's something I really enjoy following along with. The argument here is once again the elimination of logging and resource extraction. They say whatever mature forests we have standing need to remain standing, and the best example of that in Illinois is Sha National Forest. Now, I can absolutely agree that this looks to be the most beautiful location anywhere in the state, especially in the fall when the trees glisten with their yellows, oranges, and reds. But still, when I look at a place like this, I don't think it's all that unique and therefore unfit to be a national park. That said, I completely understand their argument and I do think it would be fit as a national monument or something similar. At the number 5 spot is Craters of the Moon National Monument in Idaho. You may recall that most of America's national parks came to be after they were once national monuments. And it's been tossed around for literally decades that Craters of the Moon could be Idaho's gateway to the national parks. Now, if you watched the last video, you know that I think the Sawtooth Mountains are most deserving of a national park in this state. But I think Craters of the Moon might be more unique than the Sawtooths. I had the chance to visit this park for the first time last year, and at first I was dismissive about the idea of it becoming a national park. But the longer I was there, the more I warmed up to the idea, even though I still believe it would be one of the less spectacular national parks in the country. At the end of the day, the core focus with these national parks is protecting rare resources. And with its 3 major lava fields, home to some of the best examples of open rift cracks in the world, I do believe it would be fit. It's not one I'd be overly enthusiastic about, but I do think it could pass as a national park due to how unique the scenery is. At number 4, I want to talk about Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. A few years ago, I got to visit this park, and at the time, it was probably number 1 on this list. But it's slowly fallen down the ranks as there has been a ton of objections from the locals. Residents have told lawmakers that they don't want their communities mobbed by potentially 600,000 more visitors estimated if it becomes a national park. In their defense, remember, New York City is only an hour and a half away from this place. Now, I do believe there's ways you can compromise by introducing a permit or reservation system for non-residents. Additionally, I feel that the northeast region of America is underrepresented in its national parks, and that this area really surprised me by how beautiful it was. It's got some of the best waterfalls anywhere in the east and nice mountains which are especially beautiful in the fall. Another obstacle is because the Delaware Water Gap is located in 2 separate states, it's a bit trickier to gain support for a national park because you have to get lawmakers on both sides of the border on board. We'll see if momentum picks up again in the future, but as of now, it seems that there's still a long ways to go before we see a Delaware Water Gap National Park. Number 3, Katahdin Woods and Waters National Monument in Maine. Since the late 1990s, locals have been both adamantly for and against the creation of another national park in Maine. In 2016, this stunning land, which sits adjacent to Baxter State Park, became a national monument, setting it up for a potential redesignation in the coming years. The current boundaries protect part of the largest undeveloped forest east of the Rockies. It's a beautiful place on its own, but my hope is that they can combine the land with Baxter State Park and then it's absolutely worthy of a national park. The rumored name, which would be Maine Woods National Park, could be home to several of the state's highest peaks, including Mount Katahdin itself. I've already wanted to visit this area for quite some time now, but if it became a national park, it would only shoot up on my list. Number 2, Ocmulgee Mounds National Historic Park in Georgia. This is the only park on this list I'm outright not in support of becoming a national park. Admittedly, I don't know too much about this one, but any location that focuses on history over natural beauty should not be a national park. You can have history, like at Dry Tortugas National Park in Florida or Mesa Verde National Park in Colorado, but nature has to be incorporated and prioritized. Ocmulgee Mounds preserves traces of more than 10 millennia of Native American history. I think it would be an interesting place to visit, but it's what a national historic park is literally meant for. It would be very out of place as a national park, just as Gateway Arch is in Missouri. And to me, it's disappointing that it made it into the top 3 on this list. Luckily, we can end on a positive note because at number 1 is Cherukua National Monument in Arizona. Recently, bipartisan legislation was introduced to the Senate, which would elevate this remote national monument to a national park. Of all the parks on this list, I could see this one happening as soon as this year, and I would support it too. In many ways, the unique formations at Cherukua remind me a lot of Bryce Canyon National Park in Utah and Pinnacles National Park in California if you were to put them together. The extensive hoodoos and balancing rocks are very impressive and complement the already stunning mountain scenery. There's a nice variety of hikes and scenic drives, and the natural beauty is sufficient enough, so I would have no problem if this became America's 64th national park. But there you have it, the top 7 contenders to become a national park. There have been so many others which have been proposed over the years, but these seem to be easily the most likely. For all but a few locations on this list, I hope that they become national parks, and for those that don't quite make the cut, I hope that they at least find their way into the National Park Service. Let me know in the comments which of these parks you'd support becoming national parks, and if you'd like to support the channel, I'd appreciate it if you left a like on this video and subscribe to Travel Dash for more content like this in the future. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon. Bye guys.